As live by the City of Hamilton and temporarily archived on the City. Also be audibly and or visually recording this meeting. I remind everyone, put your cell phone, pager, BlackBerry into manner mode, please. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
You, Mr. Chairman, no, there are none.
I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Johnson, Pearson on the motion. All those in favor? Carried. Item 2 is declaration of interest. Are there any items before us for consideration that you have an interest on? None are noted, Madam Clerk. Item 3 is the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. You have before you the minutes of our April the 14th meeting. Any errors or omissions? Motion to approve by Johnson, seconded by Collins. All those in favor? Carried. We have no delegation requests. Item 5 are consent items. Is there any items you would like raised for discussion? Anyone? Then could I have a motion to receive items 5.1A to F and 5.2, moved by Pearson, seconded by Morrill. On the motion, all those in favor? Carried. May I have a motion to move for items 5.3 and 5.4? Collins and Pearson. On the motion, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you all. Item 6, public hearings and delegations. We have none noted. Item 7.1, the employee attendance report. May I please have a motion to refer report HUR 14003 respecting employee attendance for this one time only to the May 21st, 2014 General Issues Committee. Moved by Johnson, Pearson. Discussion on the referral. All's in favor? The motion is carried. Item 8.1 is the enforcement of businesses operating without a license. Councillor Collins, I understand you have an amending motion. Would you like to introduce your motion now?
I do, Mr. Chairman. It's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Morrill, that report PED 13037B respecting enforcement of businesses operating without a license be amended by adding a subsection C to read as follows. C, that the matter on the Audit, Finance and Administration Committee's outstanding business list respecting a work plan to address performance audit report 2013 and 2014 unlicensed businesses be referred to the Planning Committee.
Before I come back to the motion, there is any discussions on the report? Motion on the item C. All those in favor? Carried. On the main motion as amended, moved by Pearson, seconded by Clark. Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, it might be I think wise at this point in time, understanding there was some public discussion on this in the media as well. Maybe Mr. Hayes will provide an update in terms of where we are with the number of businesses and the revenues on that. Just a brief summary.
Fine, thank you. Mr. Marty Hazel.
So
please.
through Mr. Chairman, the auditor had identified potentially 684 unlicensed businesses and about $130,000 in annual revenues, which may be captured by licensing those. We've taken a look at that list of 684, quick list, and I can report at this time 477 of them are no longer operating, or the businesses found to not require a license, or they're already licensed. 43 files are opened, and we're in the process of investigating them for licensing. And so there's about 160 really on the list that we have not looked at. We have to go out on site to look at for the need for a license. And of the 130,000 in potential new revenues, we already have 90 of that in our system. So rather than 684 and 130,000, we're looking at about 160 businesses and about 40,000 in potential revenues.
Okay. Councillor Clark, please.
I had a discussion with staff with regards to landscaping businesses that were unlicensed, and it was indicated that there are still a number of business classifications that we don't license. Do we have a report identifying any business classes or businesses that have no bylaw permitting us to license?
Mr. Chairman, we have the authority under the Municipal Act to license businesses for 3 reasons: public nuisance, health and safety, or consumer protection. And we have about 30 schedules of licenses. We don't license every type of business in the city. We did report to the Planning Committee back in 2009 or 10 with a list of about a dozen businesses, which we may consider licensing, and committee agreed that we should take a look at those as time permits to see if there's a need to license them. But we have not reported to committee on it with a full report on what we license and what we don't license.
And how much work would that entail? Because it got me thinking over the weekend. I was really wondering how many businesses are out there that are operating in Hamilton and perhaps doing very similar things, but they're not licensed for whatever reason.
So, through Mr. Chairman, thinking about it as we're speaking here, maybe it might be wise to provide an information report with an overview of the situation, the number of licenses, what we license, what we don't license, and that we could take it from there for further discussion.
It might be helpful, Mr. Chairman, if we had that information report. It just came up in conversation with staff, and they indicated that there was lots of businesses that we don't license for whatever reason. So perhaps if we could get just a 1 or 2 page document indicating what they are and perhaps the reasons why we're not licensing them.
Would you like it to come back to us, or would you like it to be part of the report, the information that goes as we've referred this item on to the, onto GIC? Oh, sorry, onto the Planning Committee.
I looked to Councillor Collins because it was his motion to move it on to planning. This might be a much larger document. I don't know whether or not that would be a discussion that you want to have at GIC or here.
Onto GIC? Paparella?
It is at the will of the committee, unfortunately. It does fall under the Planning Committee's mandate. All matters that go to any are matters citywide for all of council. But if you prefer it to go to GIC, we will, however, appropriately belong at planning.
Process might be is to, as we're directing, moving it to planning and that, and maybe at the pleasure of moving it out to GIC. Yeah.
So why don't we just have the information report come here, and then we can direct it to the appropriate panel to look at it, or give directions to staff in terms of how we think it should be dealt with.
Except we've moved it off to planning, Councillor.
I didn't hear a motion.
We just dealt with it. We just approved the amendment. Item C, the addition to item C.
Yeah, so this would fall in there, is what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
The ones that we have no statutory for. Okay.
Okay. And as a result, as you know, all the reports find their way to all members of council, so when it finds its way to planning, we'll be able to, to see that. Okay. So on the motion to, on the motion to approve the motion as amended, moved by Pearson, seconded by Clark. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion's carried. Item 8.2 is the reserve policies update. Any discussion? Clark? Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just get a brief statement in terms of what's actually changed in the reserve policies?
Brian McMullen,
Or
please.
has nothing changed and this is just an update?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, this is an update. We were requested last February 2013 to come back with some reports, and we chose 4 reserves to summarize in this report in 2014. In addition, we added a report on the administration of the reserves. So just documents and formalizes practices that have been in place, and that's what Appendix A to the report does. And then the 4 other reserves, the tax stabilization reserve, unallocated capital levy reserve, the waste management recycling reserve, and the enterprise fund reserve were reserves that we were asked to come back with and provide an update on.
Okay. So the reason I ask this is because when I'm reading A through E, it says that the reserve policy 4 be approved. And I was trying to read through and figure out, well, what's changed? That's indicating there's been a change in those policies. So you're telling me there's been no changes in any of those policies, and this is simply a report on what's been happening with those reserves under those policies.
Correct. Through you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so in the tax stabilization reserve, we use that reserve for a number of year-end disposition. During the year, we use it for a number of in-year approvals of programs. So the reserve policy provides an update on what we've been doing and what our practice has been. And we were asked to come back with target levels. So in the report, we identify some potential targets for those reserves. We're not near those target levels of what we might want to be for financial sustainability, but we've identified those targets in this report.
Okay, so the reserve policy that we approved approximately 9 months ago, I think it was now, that still stands, and this is just dealing with what targets should be for each of them.
Correct, through you, Mr. Chairman. So yeah, annually we approve the reserve report, and what that typically does, it shows the activity that took place during the past year and what's planned to take place in the upcoming year. And that's a very detailed report, as you know. So this provides an update on some of those specific reserves in there, provides more detail on 4 of the specific reserves.
Apologies, Mr. Chairman, and when I was reading the report, I have implied that there were changes and I couldn't find them, so now I know that there isn't there. Thank you.
So Councillor Clark, you'd be pleased to move the motion and that, seconded by Councillor Pearson. Further discussion, anyone? All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Item 8.3 is the capital projects budget appropriation and work in progress transfer. Discussion, anyone? What's the pleasure of committee? Moved by Pearson, seconded by Morrill. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Item 8.4 is the grants subcommittee report by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Morrill. Okay, Councillor Collins, please, would you second the motion for grant subcommittee report? Discussion on the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Now we can cut the checks to the organizations. 8.5 is the audit report, corporate services investments. Ann Pakarek is here and Jerry Boychuk. Questions on the report? Pleasure committee. Councillor Collins, seconded by Councillor Johnson. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Item 8.6 is the audit report, public works fuel usage. Certainly keeping the audit division busy, aren't we? Discussion on the item. Moved by Johnson, seconded by Pearson. Councillor Clark, question, sir?
So I'm just asking Ann, as we have done many times, was there anything that jumped out that was a concern for you?
Chair, there are some very old fuel sites that still are on a manual dipping system and things like that. They're not electronic. And we were suggesting that either they be converted or they actually be looked at to see if we could close those sites. I think that out of 24 sites, I think that there's 2 or 3 that are still the very old-fashioned type of control.
Wow. And so, Mr. Murray, how would we go about making sure that they're looked into, they're up to current standards, safety issues, or I have a whole bunch of things flying through my head right now.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, obviously I'll take the matter up with PW. I would be, in terms of closing the sites, I don't know if that results in any kind of added out-of-the-way travel costs or whatever, but I mean, needless to say, if we can consolidate to fewer sites that deal with this particular type of issue and doesn't have any negative impact, then why wouldn't we? So I'll make a point of taking it up with Jerry to appropriate staff to see why we couldn't just simply stop utilizing those sites, and if there's a good argument for keeping them, obviously to invest in the technology to ensure that we get proper coverage of the fuel.
So, and I don't know how often they actually inspect these sites either, so would it be appropriate for us to actually have a motion where we would ask that the sites be inspected and reviewed, and consolidation is appropriate, then do so?
I believe that's in the recommendations under the audit report, and actually, certainly in my discussions with Meth Packarack, Public Works has been, I'm going to say, very receptive and responsive to the recommendations and are moving forward on it. But if you wish something additional, fine, but there's clearly has been a willingness to investigate the issues that were raised in the audit report.
And that the other sites were going to be inspected, review and consolidate, but when I heard and made some inquiries about a couple of these, I was taken that they've been operating in that manner for quite some time, so.
Because you're a new face to some of us.
Mr. Chair, Lyle Stedman, Manager Central Fleet. So the sites you're talking about, all of our 21 or 24 fuel sites that we have in the city are inspected on a regular basis in compliance with the Gasoline Handling Act and TSSA. We do have certified staff that do that. We currently have an evaluation binder of all of our fuel sites in the current condition, and we did apply for capital this year to do some improvements and upgrades on those sites. In conjunction with that, we have talked to Marnie Clucky's group. She has a new employee under compliance in her organization who's going to take a look at this in conjunction with the Yards Review survey or study to see if there are areas that we could eliminate fuel sites and consolidate others.
Chairman, I thought I heard you say that we have staff that do the inspecting for the TSSA?
That's correct. We have certified staff that do that. They work in transit, and they provide those inspection services for all of our sites.
TSSA doesn't visit any of our sites?
TSSA will do a spot on our sites, but they're typically not interested in sole-owned, sole-used commercial sites. They're typically looking at the retail market to make sure that there's compliance for the general public safety. We don't have public access on any of our sites.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further on this? What's the pleasure of committee, please? Moved by Collins, seconded by Morrill. Okay, then we are ahead of the curve. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. 8.7 is the assessment and funding for value for money audit program. Moved by Collins, seconded by Pearson. Discussion on the item? No? All those in favor? Opposed? The motion's carried. Item 8.8 is the audit report, corporate services, information security, and identity. Should committee wish to discuss the private and confidential Appendix A to the report, we will need a motion to move into closed session pursuant to Section 8.1 subsection A of the city's procedural bylaw 10-053 and Section 239 subsection A of the Ontario Municipal Act 2001 is amended as the subject matter pertains to the security of the property of the municipality or local board. Otherwise, may I have a mover and seconder for item 8.8? So what's the pleasure? Moved by Johnson. Offline? Okay. You'll second it, Councillor Clark? Okay. Discussions? All those in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you very much. Item 10 is notices of motion. There are none posted. Are there any notices of motion for members of the committee? None are noted, Madam Clerk. General information and other business. May I have a motion to approve the proposed new due dates as shown for items 11.1A and B. Johnson, Pearson, all those in favor? Carried. Any other business anyone wishes to raise? Private and confidential, we didn't need to deal with it. May I have a motion to adjourn, moved by Pearson, seconded by Morrill. All those in favor? Thank you very much, everyone.